today we're going to discuss Rose Gordon with the most expertise of them all, Dr. Michael Johnson, who's a professor of American literature at the University of Maine at Farmington, with his primary research areas in African American literature. So, and you said it's all right if I call you Michael.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Michael, I am Ginger, and welcome to this Women Ranchers series. And I'm so very grateful that you're going to share with us about Rose Gordon. Why don't we just start with how did you choose her for your subject matter?
Well, so I came to Rose Gordon through her brother Taylor. So Taylor Gordon was a pretty famous singer in the 1920s as a singer of spirituals. And he had written a book about growing up in White Sulphur Springs, Montana, called Born to Be. And I knew that the Montana Historical Society had his papers in their collection. And I went there to look at them. I didn't really know much about Rose at that time, right? He refers to her as Sis in his book. And basically, there's about 2 pages about her. But what I found in the collection was that it was the papers of the entire Gordon family, and there was a lot of material about Rose. And so it was really getting into the archives and seeing what was available that got me interested in Rose Gordon's story. She was interesting in part because she did not do what Taylor did. Taylor left White Sulphur Springs, went to New York, and became famous. Rose lived her entire life in White Sulphur Springs, and I thought that she made a really interesting comparison contrast with Taylor as one of the few African Americans living in this little town in Montana who stayed there, right? He lived her entire life there, and was very well received, very well known in the community. She ended up writing all these letters and columns for the local newspaper. So there was a kind of a big record of her writing as well that made her an interesting topic to look at.
That is wonderful. I was wondering if trying to get information on her would be difficult. But, of course, you couldn't do better than having met her brother and then, going from there to find more information. If you were going to do a little snippet of her life, how would you explain that to us?
So she was an original pioneer to Montana, right? She was born in Montana when it was still a territory. Her mother was a former slave.
Wow.
They migrated to Barker. Her father was a chef, and he had a job with one of the mining companies doing the cooking for the workers. And that's how they wound up in Montana. And then they settled in White Sulphur Springs. When they arrived in White Sulphur Springs, their father had a job at one of the hotels. He was a chef there with at a hotel that specialized in French cuisine. And the clientele for the hotel came from all over the world. This is the time when the Sulphur Springs in White Sulphur Springs were quite popular, and people came there to take the water. Eventually, Rose's mother started doing catering for local families. After her husband died, after Rose's father died, she became the primary breadwinner. And she moved from doing these kind of catering events to opening her own restaurant on Main Street in White Sulphur Springs. And she operated that for about 20-some years until she died in 1924, at which point Rose took over as sort of the sole proprietor of the store. So Rose had about 40 years of serving food in White Sulphur Springs, right, of operating a cafe. Things got tough during the Second World War to make a living with the restaurant. And then she did this kind of remarkable thing. She'd always been interested in healthcare. She'd wanted to be a doctor when she was younger, and wasn't able to do it with having to take care of her mother. But she ended up doing a course in massage therapy, and she became a massage therapist. And for the rest of her life, she was a massage therapist working in White Sulphur Springs. Sometimes working with the hospital, sometimes working with her own private clients. But she had a kind of a remarkable two-part career in doing very different things, right? Working
Yeah.
as a restaurant owner, but then as a healthcare specialist.
Completely. Well, what about her life as a homesteader?
So her life as a homesteader was probably not as once that she arrived in White Sulphur Springs, the city had been, or the town had been pretty well established.
Okay.
But she definitely was there in I think she was born in 1882 maybe, something like that. But she was there in White Sulphur Springs in the early days. But certainly with her restaurant, and even before that, a lot of what her work involved was basic homesteading work, right? They took in laundry, they raised vegetables that they sold in the store. Before Rose started working at the restaurant, she worked sort of as the community babysitter, and that often involved not just working in White Sulphur Springs, but going out to some of the ranches in the surrounding areas, like in Martindale. There was a family that she just went out and lived with for quite a long time at various times, taking care of the children. The mother there had migraine headaches that were kind of debilitating, and so they had Rose come up and take care of the children when she wasn't able to do so.
So you said that they did do some of their own vegetables and sell that. Did they have any chickens or livestock or anything?
Yes, they raised chickens, sold eggs.
Okay.
Right. Rose's mother did a little bit of everything, especially right after her husband died. 'Cause he died in like the mid 1890s. He was in a train wreck. He was cooking on a Canadian train that was going to the gold mines in Alaska, and he died in a train wreck. So they did a lot of different things to make ends meet. Plymouth Rock chickens, I think, were the type of chicken that they raised.
Oh, wow. Okay.
At that time, there were quite a few brothels in White Sulphur Springs, and so her mother also sort of sold kind of like folk cures to the women who worked at the brothels, right? But she also sold them eggs, and I guess she also was like pretty well renowned as a fortune teller, and so she had sort of a sideline of telling fortunes, right? And that was also popular with the brothel.
Oh, I bet so. Well, did her mother and her live together? Did her brother live there? Did she live alone? What was her setup?
So the Gordons had 5 children.
Okay.
Taylor was the youngest. Robert was the oldest. They all lived in White Sulphur Springs. Robert and Rose lived there for all their lives. Taylor, he got a job as a porter, as a chauffeur for a man who lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. The rest of the family was there, so the entire family was there, right? With all the children were there at least until 1910. They dispersed a little bit. One brother went to Seattle and worked as a chef, who worked on fishing boats. Another brother, George, went to Bolesman Lodge, right? And he was like the assistant steward at the lodge.
But Rose stayed there, you said?
Yeah, Rose stayed there. There were maybe a couple of years where she moved away to Great Falls for a little while, but for the most part, she stayed.
What did you think about her as far as just the personality of her? Interesting, inspiring? Do you have a sense of how you might describe her?
Yeah, I mean, the way to describe her maybe is people loved her, right? And she loved people. Marcellus Scherfy, who wrote a sort of a brief biography of Rose, described her as becoming, in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, the historian in heart of White Sulphur Springs. And that seems like just a really good description of her.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah,
right?
That's just lovely.
Her interest in local history was part of what she wrote about. She did these memorial tributes for people in the newspaper after they died. Those were extremely popular. I mean, she wrote I don't know, into the hundreds of these memorial tributes, just telling a little bit about the history of those individuals. Family members really appreciated those.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, if somebody wanted to see those, if they Googled it, could they find it? Or is it, just at a facility that you would have to go in and pull it from copies?
Be a good spot to pitch my book.
Then pitch it. Go for it.
Black Woman's West, The Life of Rose B. Gordon.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do in the book is that I quote extensively from Rose's writing.
Great.
Right now, the only way that I know to access it is through microfilm of the White Sulphur Springs newspapers, which is what I did.
Yeah.
I spent many hours in the basement.
We're all grateful you did it.
Yes, it was good fun. But I quote extensively from her writing, so you can read her writing in the book. There's also an appendix at the end of the book in which I do sort of a brief collection of the things that she published, like sort of a selection of those.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
So that gives people access to something that has been very hard to access otherwise.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and we'll make sure and, at the end have them access to being able to purchase your book and read it for themselves. Now, did anything, as you were doing your research about Rose, was there anything that surprised you?
There were always surprises.
Yeah.
I mean, the very fact that Rose existed and there was so much documentation about her that I could...
You're right, yeah.
It was a surprise because it's kind of rare, right? Not a celebrity, not someone who's famous, to have this amount of archival material saved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I'm glad that she took the time to write it and that they saved it for historical purposes.
And part of that was because Taylor was a celebrity, but Taylor's celebrity also meant that the other members of his family, that their materials were saved as well.
Which is great. Well,
I guess one other thing that kind of surprised me, I was just thinking about this yesterday. By the 1950s, she and Robert were the only black people who were living in White Sulphur Springs. And the sense that I had of her was being kind of isolated from other black people. But once I got into the archives, it was pretty clear that there were still, even though the black population of Montana was not large in the 20th century, there were people living there, and they found ways to be in touch with one another. And so she had correspondences and friendships with other black women all across the state of Montana. And that was something that I wasn't expecting to find. And I shouldn't have been surprised. It didn't necessarily make it into what she was writing about in the newspapers, but it was definitely there in her correspondence.
Well, how fortunate for them. Do you think, with her being African American, what were her choices acceptable? Did she find challenges in some of the things she was trying to do?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, so, none of the Gordon family married. None of the brothers arose.
Oh,
right?
man.
So when Taylor died in 1972 from family, and there were no surviving members, I mean, that at least is suggestive of, if there was at least some integration of the Gordons in White Sulphur Springs, and there was, just the fact that none of them married.
That's amazing.
Wonder, right?
Yeah.
At least there's a place where if you were the only black people in town, and you were in a social situation, and actually after I think 1913, 1914, a legal situation where marrying someone who was not black was illegal, or at least frowned upon, then you have to look around. You have to sort of go far afield if you want to get married. And that did not happen with any of the Gordons, even though Taylor got around.
Yeah.
But he did not, as a singer, as a very good-looking singer on the road a lot, but he never married and settled down.
Wow. That's amazing that none of the siblings married.
Yeah. But it is suggestive of some of the potential hardships.
Is there an interesting story that you might share with us about her?
I'll share this. This is a story that's sort of about Rose, but it's also about the people that Rose touched in her life. when the book came out, I went and did a reading in White Sulphur Springs.
Oh,
And
that's great.
it was great. There were just a lot of people who came there who had known Rose, right? She died in 1968, but they were children growing up when Rose was still alive. And they all remembered her, right? I mean, 50-some years later, I asked them to just, if they had stories they wanted to share about Rose, to share stories. And they all had stories to tell. And it was quite wonderful.
That's great.
There was someone who, I guess Rose had a distinctive laugh, which of course doesn't make it into the written record, but there was someone there who could do a good imitation of her laugh. So
did anybody record that? That's wonderful.
They helped bring her to life in ways that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, of course.
But also just the fact that all this time later, they had such concrete, vivid memories of her, which just amazing. Speaks to the role she played in White Sulphur Springs, I think. All those memories.
That's very touching, absolutely. Well, have you thought about in writing the book, well, one of the things in my doing, whether my graduate school PhD work is, if you're going to write a book, then think about a screenplay. Have you ever thought about that?
This would make a great story. Right, it really would. We haven't even talked about the Ringling Brothers Circus.
Oh, well, tell me.
John Ringling, who was one of the main Ringling brothers, became an investor in the Smith River Valley, and he met Taylor when Taylor was chauffeuring people around to show them potential real estate purchases. And Taylor eventually became the private porter on John Ringling's private railway car. And so he traveled all over the country with John Ringling for a while. That's also what got him to New York, where he became involved in singing.
Oh, wow.
But so John Ringling came to White Sulphur Springs a lot. Actually, the town of Ringling is named after him. That's nearby. And Richard Ringling, one of the sons, creamery there, right? And so the Ringlings were sort of an important part of White Sulphur Springs culture in the early. But so among the other interesting things about this family is this wild relationship with the Ringling Brothers Circus.
I mean, who gets to say that?
Yeah, exactly.
Was there anything about her that you did not put in the book?
I tried to cover as much as possible. Mm-hmm. I tried to, even where there were places where I didn't know much. So there's some exploration in the book of why she may have not got married, right? There was a reference at one point in the correspondence. Someone wrote Rose a letter and said, "I saw the notice in the paper about your marriage. I was very surprised." And I was like, "What? What marriage?" But I had found no evidence of any marriage.
Oh.
I have no word to there. I found no notices in the paper. I don't know. I mean, it could be a joke.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you never know with private correspondence exactly what the context is. But so there are things that I didn't know that at least would talk about. I don't think of anything that I could think of that I left out. There was a specific topic.
Yeah. Well, how about after the fact? Did anything come out that, someone either contacted you or when you went to do any of your book readings or lectures, did anybody ever bring something up?
Lots of people did. So there were things that I definitely would have included. Maybe.
Okay.
But I think it was I think most of what I got from that was just the general feeling. It wasn't any one incident in particular or one sort of comment in particular. It was just sort of the overwhelming sense of how much people loved her and wanted to talk about her and remembered her. Well,
isn't that the way we would all love to be remembered so warmingly and, just that's just lovely that you got to hear it in person.
Well, Rose knew the secret in that if you loved other people, they would love you back, right? Or at least,
nice.
If you treated other people nicely, they appreciated that and would return that favor.
Yeah. Well, from doing your research with her, has this led you to like through the connection of researching her, led you to another book, or like for me, I kind of become, a spider web of, oh my goodness, all these ideas come out that, oh, I'll go this way, research this. But how about for you?
If I think about other research possibilities, I think it's some of the other women living in Montana at the same time that Rose was around, that were friends of Rose, that would be interesting to look at. There was a woman named Octavia Bridgewater, who was from Helena, and she was active in women's clubs that Rose was part of. But she was also interested in healthcare, and I think sometime in the 1920s she went away to New York and went to school to become a nurse, and was kind of like a groundbreaking person as an African American woman in nursing. She came back to Helena and worked as a private nurse because the Helena hospitals were segregated. She could not work as a nurse in the hospital. After World War II, opportunities opened up. They needed nurses, particularly to work with the black troops. And so she joined the Red Cross as a nurse. She went to war. She worked with soldiers who were at war. When she mustered out at the end of World War II, she had the rank of lieutenant.
Wow.
She came back. The Helena Hospital gave her a job, so she integrated the Helena Hospital as the first black nurse. Right. So there are other women like that that sort of pop up here and there around Rose's story that would be interesting to think about. We have these really kind of unique lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are you working on another book now, or about to? Like, where are you with that?
No, I sort of my field is literary criticism, and so the biography was not my usual thing, and it's hard. I'm just going to tell you, writing a biography is hard.
Yeah.
It took me 15 years to do these biographies of Taylor Gordon and Rose Gordon. And so even though I think there's some interesting stories that are out there, I think they're for somebody else. I think I'm going much more toward my comfort zone, which is writing about movies and books.
Nothing wrong with that. We all need that. Well, how about before we do close out, is there anything that you would like to share about Rose or your book that we might be interested in?
Well, I will just sort of reiterate that one of the things that I made a conscious effort to do in the book was to get Rose's voice in it. I sort of thought about the book, I wanted to approach it like a collaboration, that I was working with Rose and not just telling Rose's story. And so I do have her voice in the book, right? I have Rose's words that she wrote. They're an important part of the book. There are probably more quotations in the book than you usually see in an autobiography, or than you usually see in Rose's words. So that's one of the things I really recommend the book for, is that you get not only my take on things, but you get Rose's own words. And those words are not easily accessible right now because most of them are in the microfiche files of the West Sulphur Springs newspapers.
Yeah, once again, like I said, we're grateful you did all that. But, it's just some wonderful reviews of your book and others saying that you do catch her voice and share it nicely is, wonderful remembrance of her. And you did just an excellent job. I will make sure and put up the information to your book. If there's nothing else specifically you'd like to say, I'll close this out here.
Right. I'll say one last thing, which is to give a shout out to the Montana Historical Society and to the archives there. Working with the Montana Historical Society Press was a great joy. They were really excellent. They also had access to photographs, historical photographs. So one of the good things about the book, too, is that there's a selection of photographs of the Gordon family, of West Sulphur Springs. So shout out to Montana Historical Society for what they do.
Absolutely, and I will also include a link for them so we can appreciate, that aspect of it, and I understand how much work they do for not very much money. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I appreciate it greatly. And as we close out the Women Ranchers series on Rose Gordon, I hope that you will check out his book, A Black Woman's West, The Life of Rose B. Gordon. Thank you, and Naked Rancher out. Bye.